thing you get from this blizzard.
There are sounds from the 1970s that your brain never actually forgot. You just stopped hearing them. Not the music, the everyday sounds. The ice cream truck jingle coming down the street on a summer afternoon. The clatter of a typewriter hammering letters into paper. The clunk of an 8-track switching mid-song. The world moved on and left every single one of them behind. But your memory never did. You heard that ice cream truck 2 blocks away, and your body moved before your brain did. That jingle coming down the street meant one thing, and you already knew it. You dropped whatever was in your hands and ran for the door, hollering back into the house for change. Sometimes you made it. Sometimes you watched that ice cream truck turn the corner just as you hit the sidewalk, out of breath, coins in your fist. That jingle never left. 40 years later, something in you still moves the second you hear it. Every house had one and every office had 10. Those keys hammering into paper one by one, fast enough to blur if you were good enough. And then that bell, a small clear ring at the end of every line, followed by the hard K chunk of the carriage return being slammed back into place. It wasn't background noise. It was the sound of something actually being made. Words becoming permanent, one keystroke at a time. You don't hear that sound anywhere in the world today. But right now, something in your fingers remembers exactly what those keys felt like. Nobody warned you it was coming. That loud double ring hit every room in the house at once, and everything stopped. Dinner, homework, whatever was on television. You ran for that phone on the kitchen wall and grabbed the receiver before the second ring finished. Because if you missed it, it was gone completely. No way to ever find out who it was. Just silence. And you stood there in the kitchen wondering about it for the rest of the night. One ring from that phone carried more weight than anything buzzing in your pocket today. Before PlayStation, before Nintendo, before any of it, there was a single white dot bouncing between 2 white lines on a black screen. And that bleep, that one sharp repeating bleep, bouncing off every wall in the living room, getting into your parents' heads from 3 rooms away. Your thumbs ached, your eyes burned. You didn't move. Nobody had ever seen anything like it, and nobody wanted to stop. 2 paddles, 1 ball, 1 sound that somehow rewired an entire generation. The first afternoon they sat down in front of it. The whole future of home entertainment started right there on that living room floor. Every house had one. That aluminum screen door with the spring on top that never quite closed right. All summer long, kids running in and out, and every single time that same hard metallic bang echoing through the house. Your mother told you 100 times not to let it slam. You let it slam every time, not out of disrespect, just because you were already halfway across the yard before it even had a chance to close. That sound meant summer was fully open for business. And somewhere in the back of your mind, it still does. Every morning started the same way. There was that rhythmic bubbling and gurgling coming from the kitchen before anyone was fully awake. The percolator worked its way up to a full boil, the coffee darkening with every cycle, the smell filling the whole house, from the bottom floor to the upstairs hallway. You knew, without looking at a clock, roughly how long it had been going by how strong that smell was. Nobody pressed a button, nobody inserted a pod. You just plugged it in and let it do what it had done every single morning for as long as you could remember. That sound meant the day was starting, whether you were ready or not. There was no remote. If you wanted a different channel, you got up, walked across the room, and turned that dial yourself. Every channel had its own satisfying, heavy click as it locked into place. 3 networks, maybe a few locals. You stood there turning through all of them in about 4 seconds before settling back on what you started with. And if the picture was fuzzy, you reached up and adjusted the antenna with one hand while holding the dial with the other, because that was just how it worked. Today, you can scroll through 500 channels and still find nothing worth watching. Back then, you had 7 options and never once complained. It fit in your shirt pocket, and it went everywhere you did. That small plastic transistor radio with the single earpiece was the only music you could take outside, to the beach, to the backyard, under the covers at night with the volume turned all the way down. You spun that dial through the static until your station came through, and everything else disappeared. The Walkman got all the glory a few years later. But every kid who carried a transistor radio first knew something. The Walkman generation never did. Every kid in a 1970s classroom knew exactly what was coming the second that cart rolled through the door. The teacher killed the lights, the projector bulb warmed up, and that slow clicking reel filled the room with flickering light and the faint smell of something burning. Then that flat mechanical beep, and the teacher advanced the slide. You were supposed to be learning something, but mostly you were sitting in the dark, half asleep, watching dust float through the beam of light coming out of that projector. It was the closest thing a school day ever came to feeling like a movie. Hold on. The next few sounds are the ones most people forget they remember. And one of them starts with something you heard from your car window on a summer night. There was nothing else like it. That mechanical click and whir as the Polaroid camera pushed a blank white square out of the front, and everyone crowded around the second it appeared. Nobody touched it. Nobody walked away. You all just stood there watching nothing slowly become something. Your face, your backyard, your birthday party, right there in your hand, 60 seconds later. No drugstore, no envelope of blurry pictures 2 weeks later. Just that white square turning into a memory while you watched. And then somebody would shake it, even though everyone knew you weren't supposed to. Every kid wanted an Evel Knievel wind-up toy, and every kid who had one spent the entire afternoon doing the same thing. You cranked that handle against the launcher and felt the whole thing getting tighter with every turn. That ratcheting sound alone told you it was ready. Then you set it down, let it go, and watched that little stuntman launch across the kitchen floor and straight into the baseboard. You picked it up and wound it again, and again, and again. That was the whole afternoon, and somehow that was enough. If you grew up near a drive-in theater in the 1970s, you know exactly what that little metal speaker felt like hanging on your car window. That tinny, crackling sound was never quite loud enough. No matter how far you turned the dial, the smell of popcorn coming through the window, the engine ticking as it cooled down, kids in pajamas in the back seat. And at the end of the night, at least one person in that parking lot drove away with that speaker still hooked to their window every single time. There was no warning when it happened. Right at the best part of the song, that hard mechanical thud of the 8-track switching programs cut straight through the music like a door slamming shut. You sat there in the quiet, waiting for it to find its place again, fingers tapping on your knee, the silence feeling longer than it actually was. Sometimes it came back at the right spot. Most of the time it didn't, and nobody complained. That was just how music worked in the 1970s. You were just glad you had it at all. For a few years in the 1970s, everybody had one. Truckers, families on road trips, kids who just wanted to feel like they were part of something bigger. That static, that squelch, and then a voice cutting through the noise from somewhere out on the highway. Citizens Band Radio was the internet of 1976. Everybody had a handle, and everybody thought they were the most interesting person on the channel. It peaked, it faded, and it left behind nothing but that crackle and a phrase nobody uses anymore. One of these sounds just took you somewhere. Tell me which one in the comments.